Framing everything function in relation to everything else. Every interaction one has with other people, cultures, locations, and heavily changing them by virtue of the interaction itself. The concept of relation allows no diversity since it doesn't allow distinct categorization, prohibit transformation, change of Murdoch 1. The concept of relation to every non-hierarchical principle, unity, relation with, equality with, and respect for the other is different ones. How the concept presupposes natural limits of other cultures, examination, complexity, subjective identification, strongly career-wise, experience where you play important concepts of locating migration, cultural conceptualization, the intrinsic nature of the Caribbean phenomenon leads one to interrogate broader subjective identity and place in the network of content communication. It is in the structure of the archipelago that finds themselves located at the forefront of a non-hierarchical world. The archipelago immediately separates itself in an important way from continental system and their correlations of universalism and totality. It is this world through different from itself that once again becomes brand new as it now links these archipelago thought to patterns resistance. Archipelago thought eventually supplants the continental thought and what resistance. And that resistance subsists in every periphery. This new world is dependent on the relation between difference and relation, where the recognition of difference enables internal articulation of relation. And in this world of relation, difference and exchange should be embraced through a process of creolization, the unpredictable collisions of concepts, cultures, and subjectivities. This is a pluralistic viewpoint on how the world operates and embrace of the differences and multiplicity of the world. Thus, the standard and world about is embracing creolization. That's Murdoch 2. From this perspective, it insisted on opening new pathways for the intersecting pluralities of relations on a core practicalities of creolization, process of culture, standards, interactive, informational, and unpredictable creolization. Indexes flexibility, opens them to realities and motive theorizing the distinct living practices of being and knowing it, emerging from productive engagement with the dynamics of the inner world, some ultimately have been long-standing concepts of identity and origin within individuals, while as a community from everybody's blending the figure by the root by the rise of whose institutional fragmentation, so concept of rootedness and monoculture through intrinsic diversity, where the rise of multiple rooted identity will fight pluralize and co-ed world of migrant subjectivities, and universality can never explain subjectivity because the infinite interaction one has with the world, since that would totalize every minuscule change of activity. These interactions also frame our ethical understanding of the world, i.e. being influenced by the truth claims of moral theories. To mean any chance of ethical uncertainty means you develop my framework, because that uncertainty proves relation. That's Glissant 1. Conception of human nature would no longer based upon a model that is universally grounded. Being in the world is nothing without the quantified totality of every sort of being in society, and every culture has contrived baroque disturbances against its uncertainty, and each transcendence of the certainty was made possible by means of these disturbances. The baroque has undergone a naturalization to extended into a civil mode of relation. And prefer additionally, 1. All ethical theories must begin from a relation with the other. The thought of the other is the ethical principle not to violate the other, but only relation can bring about the other of thought, which is what motivates change in action to respect that ethic. That's Glissant 2. Thought of the other's moral generosity sweats me to accept alterity. The thought of the other can dwell within me without making me alter course, without changing me within myself. The other thought of precisely is altering that is the moment I change my thought without renouncing its untruths, and I change. The other thought is the effects implemented by me and by you to join the dynamics which are true. The other thought is always set in motion by its influences in a whole way in which each is changed by and changes the other. And second, inclusion and denial of relations, theological plantation. They were specifically created to shut off connection and forbid communication. Endorsement of limitations, the endorsement of methodologies that have created all forms of oppression. That's Glissant 3. Each plantation was defined by boundaries whose crossing was strictly forbidden. Everything was taken care of within a closed circle. If each plantation is considered as a closed entity with what is the principle inclining them to function in similar manner. Third, conception of subjectivity is realized a relational voice of white supremacist ideas of generalization of identity which allowed hierarchization and oppression. Recognize that societies are always in flux, which means ontological forms of thought are imperially disproven. That's Glissant 4. The old idea of identity is a root leads to generalization provided by the universal values how the elite have reacted when choosing to renounce their own different definition of identity as a system of relations and contradictory form of violence. It challenges the generalizing universalism and specificity speed through which geocultural entities form through encounters and kinships is relevant. For example, there's a real situation community among the creolizing cultures of the Caribbean. Those of the Indian Ocean, however, there's nothing to say that accelerated evolution will not soon tell equally powerful encounters between the Caribbean and Brazil or among Antillean islands that will lead to the formation of new zones of relational community. It would not be possible to base on logical existence of entities whose very nature is to vary tremendously within relation to this variation. Evidence that ontological thought no longer functions. Fourth, creolized pedagogy allows the possibility of overcoming consolation with the trauma and aftermath of slavery. This pedagogy intertwines the pain and pleasure of events in an attempt to give hope to black students who come from the difficult conditions of the lasting effect of slavery. This Walcott. Creolization offers a possible in terms of life in the Americas by way of working through the trauma of slavery. For instance, contextualize and discuss the tension and abilities of a poetics of relation. We have not yet begun to calculate their consequences of creolization. As we repaint alongside pleasure, we not only bear witness to the pain of enslavement, but also we are witness to the ways in which the struggle survives towards the pleasures of cultural sharing and reinvention, making conceptual use of realization takes us further down the road to understanding what any possible recovery from the repetitive traumas of slavery might look like. What might it mean to come to terms with the violent passage, the middle passage of the grounds for not even a creolized pedagogy for the Americas. Traumatic creolization brings with it and says you think about both relative pleasure and pain that we think of slavery as a past connection of African difficulty condition of new possibility. Creolization offers us a way not only beyond the victim hero binary, but also beyond the limits of shame and defeat, rethinking the very project of education and finding creolization a path of hope on which students may come to terms with the diasporization of black communities aside from the exploration of new possibilities contention. Resolving the United States reports on have the right to protect the identity of confidential sources. That's Zone 5. A journalist source privilege makes sense. It is time for the federal government to enact such privilege as well. And a necessary aspect of creolization is opacity, the product mediated by cultural subjectivity that makes you. Opacity is never understood by other subjects because the relation one experience is always entirely unique, which allows for individuality. Confidentiality is unique. We keep respecting opacity because subjects have the right to their knowability or else difference is assumed by appropriation and totalization. That's Murdoch 3. As we meet the further first so to achieve through relational encounters, the song fleshes out the principle of opacity, which recognizes and actively draws from both the density and the diversity of the other. Opacity protects the sanctity and accessibility, poetic intention throughout the successful process of writing and reading themselves in relation. Opacity functions as corrective, essentializing or reducing the entity behind action without canceling the value of subjectivity. Opacity then serves a positive, unknowable otherness that mediates a new ground for the being in the world, and it is an epistemologically grounded world vision that allows each subject the right to his or unknowability. Opacity instructs and imposes recognition that each subject maintains cultural patterns and artifacts that will remain incomprehensible to other subjects who have not been formed by the same culture. We don't actually need to understand something in order to accept it, contribute to it, work with it, or live with it. We must renounce showing our difference of power. We preserve difference by granting opacity to others on behalf of others, which is to render power. Understanding is predicated on acceptance rather than appropriation. The forward-looking possibilities, mutual social inscription rather than the totalizing patterns of transparent knowledge and capable for theory, or rolled out for theory. One jurisdiction rolled out specifically this round how the ballot should be signed, while theories about norm taking which out of the judge's jurisdiction exists at around second. Offensive. Rollback is what is and is offensive. The theory must be contextually defined, or else it's not offensive. You can't vote for it. Third is relationality is key to norm setting because otherwise I'm not influenced by the shell to change my abusive ways in the future.
Right?
Yep.
Cool. The first piece of glissant evidence, or rather the second piece of glissant, how do we know who the other is?
The other is anybody that's not yourself.
So the other is just like anybody that doesn't share your identity.
Yeah, the argument is that any ethical interaction, like ethics in and of itself, describes the relation between individuals, i.e. Kant is respecting agency between others. Consequentialism is the effects of, that like it hurts other individuals. That sort of relationality
why does consequentialism have to do with a relation between people?
Because it's a question of like the impacts that people have inflicted.
Okay, that doesn't answer the question. The
I don't understand.
The Murdoch evidence says that differences and exchange should be embraced. What does that mean? What does it mean to embrace differences?
To embrace that creolization, we indicate that relation and opacity is entirely individualistic, i.e. your experiences are unlike anybody that has ever walked the face of the earth. That is an embrace of those differences.
Okay, what does it mean to embrace creolization?
What I just described, to embrace the differences in subjectivity and to embrace the sort of worldview.
Sure,
what
does it mean to embrace that?
To advocate for it? I don't understand the question.
Okay, that's fine. How do we weigh between different methods of embracing creolization?
Just like you would weigh under any role of the ballot. If you say, like, negating is better for creolization, you put dissent on the affirmative, you defense on the affirmative, you have offense.
Okay, that's fine. So the fourth piece of the fourth additional argument, the Walcott evidence says that a creolized pedagogy allows like overcoming consolation of the trauma and aftermath of slavery. Mm-hmm. Is this like offense under your framework?
No, it's just a reason to prefer my standard.
Can you explain why that's a reason to prefer your standard?
Yeah, so it indicates that the pedagogy of creolization is a way for individuals, specifically black students, to overcome the sort of the lifestyle that they have lived due to the lasting effects of slavery. It is an attempt to see pain with pleasure and try to create sort of a therapeutic
That's fine.
from their material conditions.
Where in the Murdoch evidence does it talk
Which
about
Murdoch evidence?
Murdoch 3, the like offense?
Yep.
Where does it say anything like remotely related to the topic?
It's a question of unknowability, which
what
is
is
basically the same thing as confidentiality.
What is unknowability?
Yeah, so unknowability is your right to not share your like aspects of your opacity with other individuals.
What is opacity?
Opacity is that the individualistic relation that I answered at the beginning process.
So like confidentiality is like your offense. Like confidentiality is good because it makes it impossible for other people to like understand your subjective identity.
Well, it allows your right to that knowability, so you can share your opacity.
Where does that right come from?
What?
Where does that right come from?
Just a natural right.
According
or
to
from the ethics, embracing creolization.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, good.
Okay. You said 4?
Yes. Anybody not good? First off, interpretation. The act must defend the right to protect the identity sources as a qualified right. To clarify, you must clarify the conditions under which this right may be legally circumvented, as well as any exceptions to the right, rather than defend the right is applied generally. The violation is that they did not. First standards out because you said without clarifying exceptions to the act, you squeeze out of any terms I read by claiming in the 1 ER they are exceptions to the right. Also means cross-sex texts and all because the text in the act which enumerates exceptions to the right is binding and verifiable. Out because you said that may impact back to class. We're incentivized to go around any sort of discussion that bring by clarifying the act in a later speech. Second is perhaps the vast majority of legal precedent deals with a qualified right. This is true for current laws. Dolphin Terror 17. State shield laws privileges typically qualified, not absolute, and court precedent deals mostly with a qualified right. Delogicano 17. DC recognizes a qualified reporter's ability for a second is held that the plaintiff must show whether desired information is relevant, then the defendant must establish a need for preserving confidentiality. Second is held that the qualified privilege for journalists, and this controls my ability to access any sort of ground in the first place because it includes me for accessing any topic corrupt the links of the app. For example, the strength of links of this app, such as circumvention, politics, or court legitimacy, all rely on the type of right that the app defends. Third is real world education. No piece of legislation is ever absolute. There are always clauses or fragments that clarify exceptions in cases in which the law doesn't apply. Framing the app in this way would emulate the intricacies of real-world legislation, which would encourage a realistic, in-depth discussion about the topic for competing interests. One is reasonability is arbitrary, invites intervention. Even if bright lines are arbitrarily determined by debaters to suit their strategy. 8 point is arbitrary in that's ways because the possibility for intervention is definitely worse than the harm to fairness because the judge disregards the legitimacy of any argumentation made by debaters and votes on an arbitrary bright line. Second is competing in terms encourages debaters to generate offense on theory. This outweighs 8 point is critical thinking skills. Offense-heavy theory debates encourage class and multiple layers of interaction. These debates force us to think on our feet in a more generic extinction outweighs substance debates. B point is that it's key to norm setting. People have to fully justify whatever norm they defend. Respond to responses to their justification, which lead to better norms in the long run. Reasonability allows debaters to get away with shady strategies because they marginally meet the bright line. Skip the third argument. No RBIs. 1 is logic. 8 points infinite rigorous RBIs necessary. Reverse RBIs add pheno such a model debate is impossible. Adjudicating kills resolvability. B point is that it denies the antecedent proving your fair education doesn't provide a proactive reason to vote me down for challenging the theoretical legitimacy of your position in the first place. C point is that fairness education and arbitrary burden do should win for being fair education. That model debate we're going to auto wins the majority positions and logic is assigned to all theory standards and logical argument does not give reason to establish a conclusion to some of its premises. So true. Second is that it kills norming. 8 point is it chills theory. Debaters will be hesitant to initiate theory against legitimate views. There's a risk they will lose an RBI. B point is that it incentivizes abuse. RBIs encourage debaters to read abusive strategies to debate theory so they can win on the RBI. This was the initiate or discourage disadvantage because the person reading the abusive position can focus on frontlining a single argument. Skip the C point. It's a voter for fairness. Fairness, the internal link to debating in the first place. If debate is unfair, people just drop out. Also a voter for education because it's the intrinsic purpose of the activity. The intrinsic purpose of the activity is the reason schools fund debate and theory outweighs substance. Zone law case cross-ups also means theory comes first. One is that case cross-ups disprove. The one is C. In order to determine whether arguments are valid, we have to be able to debate them, which is a prior question to using the case framing. Means no one of your applications of the case to theory. Second is that fairness turns your offense. 8 points, that's a question of engagement. If the round is skewed toward one side, then obviously the after debaters would win, which means evaluating theory allows us to evaluate substance. B points, that skews decision making because you can determine the better debater with different skews. Irresolvability outweighs because otherwise there is no impact to debating. Tip the C point. Next off. Interpretation. The affirmative may only offend that reporters employed by news and media organizations be granted the right to protect the identity of confidential sources. To clarify, no. Actually, skip that shell. Next off. Pleasure and pain are intrinsically valuable. People consistently regard pleasure and pain as good reasons for action, despite the fact that pleasure doesn't seem to be intrinsically valuable or anything. Moen 16. There is something undeniably good about pleasure, not undeniably bad about pain. I might ask what for, but pleasure is not good for anything further. We never ask what does that is mean, please, because pleasure is worthy in itself. Pleasure and pain are both places where we stand the line of matters of value, and only pleasure and pain are intrinsically valuable. All other values can be claimed with reference to pleasure. Occam's razor requires us to treat these as instrumentally valuable. Moen 16. Additional intrinsic values tend to be explained as things that promote pleasure and avert pain. Life, conscious activity, bring about pleasure is ontologically costly to cause plurality of intrinsic values and disvalues. So in case all values have been explanation by a single intrinsic value, disvalue, we have reason to reject more complicated accounts. Thus, the standard is maximizing expected well-being preferred. Additionally, parameters. Framework debate defines what obligations are. That means it's also a topicality issue, so we have to theoretically define our interpretation. A definition should be subject to theoretical connotation the same way other words would be. For my interpretation, A point is God. Every impact function on the utilize other ethics to one side exclusively kills. Fairness is we both need arguments to win, and harms education since we have little arguments. This is uniquely key. This is uniquely true of the affirmative framework. There's literally only one person who writes. There's literally only 3 people who write about Glissant, and they all end up in favor of him. Also, there was no topic literature about there was no literature about Glissant in context of the topic, which means util is all infinitely better. B point is topic literature. Most articles are written through the lens of util because they're crafted for policymakers and the general public who take consequences being important, not philosophy majors. Key to fairness and education. The lit is where we do research and determines how we engage in the round. Fairness of voters since debate is a competitive activity. Vote for the better debater, not cheater. This is a framework for not a reason to drop the debater. Also classify all the reasons as to why they can't cross-apply case to theory. This is a prior question to your framing arguments. Next off, Trump has a vice grip on the Republican base, but a weak Congress and lack of campaign promises puts him at risk. Lec 9-6. When it comes to motivating GP voters, nobody's more effective than Trump. Trump supporter among Republican base with a level of intensity that's not rival Trump's ability ability to move GOP political economy, winning streak ability to totally swing an election, hasn't followed through on core promises, keep the base engaged, candidacy to happen to Trump and Trump and his supporters hate the media, the office, is defending the media and alienating Trump's base. So Alyssa, 9th day, Trump says the supporters are the worst, most dishonest people. He calls the media the enemy of the people, systematically trying to dismantle the idea of a free press. Trump supporters tendency and any attempt to turn the media with derision from Trump backers and collapse. The base support leads to diversion to nuclear war. Street 16, doubts whether the president is capable of handling power as forgetful pursue policies that will accurate support that increase the possibility of diversionary wars, while irresponsible decision to use nuclear arsenal, have committed nuclear monarchies, lack of accountability from the inability to effective groups have their interests represented at the moment of nuclear use, converted the U.S. government into a monarchic form of rule that places all defense in the executive. Card at executive, the case. The underview. You say K before theory because the jurisdiction, because the role of the battle is within realm. But just because theory is a norming issue does not mean that judges do not have the jurisdiction to vote on it. Theory becomes a norming issue after judges vote on it, which means it's still intrinsic to the round. You say K before theory is key to offense, but theory shells redefine how we contextualize offense, which means that this argument is just nonsensical. You say that I don't disincentivize you from reading these theoretically illegitimate positions in the future, but yes, a loss definitively deters you from reading these positions in the future. This argument is also just one sentence long and has no warrant, which means theory before the critique. Case framing. Big problem with their framing. The first card frames the entire framework. It says that every ethical framework is about a relation to everything else, but in Crossix, he's not able to answer how utilitarianism is a theory about relations between people. Util is just an aggregate of philosophy that is simple pain and pleasure. There is no distinction between there is no reason as to why things like dopamine levels in individual people have to do with relations between people, which means that your framework does not explain util, and util is definitively an exception to your framework. If any of the TGF or the Moen arguments are true, then you can vote on util. Also disproves your framework because your framework is founded on the fact that every theory is about relations to other people, but util is not. Also, you say your framework is key to solving for the other. But the only reason we know people are otherizing, the only reason we know that certain events are bad is because they increase pain, which means your framework is just explained by 9. Your offense is terrible. You are not able to explain in cross-sex why people have a right to know ability. You say it's just a natural law, but there is no reason as to why you have a right to know ability. You don't have any natural rights. Challenge it to an art to explain that, which means no offense.
Are you good?
Yeah.
Okay, what's the link on the disad?
The link is just that the AF is hated by Trump supporters, which means
it's contingent on a post-fiat implementation of the
if you were like dealing from the disad, you can do that.
Okay, I will. What were your arguments against why I can't wait case? Or what didn't you read?
You want me to just resend the doc?
Actually, yeah, can we stop cross-ex?
Yeah, sure.
237.
Actually,
I
didn't read the second shell, but I think that's it.
You want us to stop cross-ex for this?
don't know. Never mind.
Yeah, you just keep going, dude.
What didn't you read?
Just the second off, and then
No, you
below
on the theory outweighs substance stuff.
Oh, I read everything. Oh, sorry, I'll resend the doc. Yeah, I'll just resend the doc.
We're in the middle of a cross-ex.
Dude, keep going.
Okay. What were the warrants for why fairness education are voters?
Fairness is a voter because it's the internal link to debating in the first place. If debate is unfair, people just drop out.
Okay.
Education is a voter, 1, because it's the intrinsic purpose of the activity, 2, because it's the
Wait,
reason
what's the
schools
warrant for that?
What's the warrant for what?
Why education is intrinsic to the activity?
1 is that we debate to learn. 2nd is that schools fund debate because it's educational.
Okay. Were those the only warrants for fairness education?
Yeah, I resent the doc, too.
Okay. Did you read these cards on case?
No.
Okay, the argument about how it disproves my framework because every framework is about relation, you explain this?
Sure, so your framework seems to indicate that all ethical theories come from a standpoint of relations between
My argument
people.
is that the world operates in terms of relation.
Yes,
Why does that mean that
your argument is that ethical theories must stem from relations between people because that is the way in which the world operates, but util does not.
If util is an aggregation between the sufferings of different individuals, how is that not relation? Or at least a relationality between what the plan does and the impacts of that.
Wait,
that
so the relation between the plan and impacts, so that would just seem to me like you're saying that any relations between anything.
Yeah, that's the claim of the Murdoch evidence. Yes.
Sure, there is literally a relation between everything. Your argument is that there are relations between people. Aggregating people does not prove a relationship between them. I
think you misunderstand. Like it's not a personal relationship, rather just a connection between them. But That's okay.
I would argue that there is no connection.
Was there any offense against Glissant?
No.
Okay. What were the justifications for parameters?
For parameters?
Just, like, all I see is that we have to theoretically defend our interpretations. Why?
Because framework debate defines what obligations are. Also is an impact filter. Absent framework, you have no impacts, which means you have to theoretically defend it as you would topicality. The standards are ground and topic literature. Util is key to ground because almost every, every impact
I
flows
got
under ground.
That's fine. Bro.
Cool.
You're certainly welcome to attend to you. The game doesn't start until 10, so we're going to be there a while. This is why we drove into the cars. You want to take one car. I told you you did not want that. I helped you. Alright, just let me know if we're going to see you all or not. Whenever y'all figure it out.
Are you stop rep 118? The order's gonna be AC, theory. You took this off.
AC.
Just sit down.
Overview and then line by line.
Is there a dog?
No.
Is there gonna be a counterentropy on theory?
Yes.
Okay. Alright, I'm good.
Anybody not ready?
What's the rest of the order? You just said AC theory.
Oh, my bad. AC theory. Wait, AC theory, NC, and then dissent.
And there's no dog.
No. Anybody not ready? Extend the framework, everything function, relationships, in relation to everything else, and interaction with people, culture, locations, etc. Always change subjectivity, i.e. a bad experience may deter me from doing that action again. That this relation should be embraced through realization and affirmation of the world's multiplicity and encouragement of metaphysical collisions, omnicontention, opacity is the melting pot of the relational experiences in your life that have constructed your individuality, and embracement of realization necessitates an embracement of opacity, is literally relation in terms of subjectivity. The right to confidentiality is absolutely necessary to respecting opacity, and subject have the right for others to understand the relationality. Breaking confidentiality agreement with force, the subject to revealing aspects of their opacity, which restricts realizations and attempt to comprehend the incomprehensibility of of opacity denies an appropriate subjectivity, and framing it, you know, 2 and R, don't allow 2 and R arguments against arguments extended from the 1 AC. A point is that 1 in the first is usually 2, otherwise you get 2 translated to 2, answer by constructor, while I only get 1, which would be an structural disadvantage. B point is that new 2 and R arguments, it means I can only respond in the 2A, but lack of a 3 and R means those answers can never be contested, which means the debate is super irresolvable, so we can't flesh out arguments. And even if you evaluate 2 and R arguments, conceded arguments in the 1 AC have a 100% conflict, which means all extensions outweigh on probability of the impacts on the line of the AC. They say Crosby's proof. I'm not answering how util is a theory about people, but aggregation is relation because of the difference within people and in the relationality between how it affects different people. It's not a question of a personal relation, rather just a connection between them. Next, it says that it disproves my friend. Rather, I'm speaking to point about everything is relation. Not that every ethical theory has to do that. Next, they say no offense. There's no reason to do that. That was in the overview. Let's go to theory. They consider multiple reasons coming out of the 1AC. They're going to indict theory. The first is the logical implementation argument. Any limitation on the 1AC or the logical implementation, because the point of the implementation was to forbid communication between individuals, i.e., forbidding relationality, which is exactly the logic of the 1AC. Insofar as it goes on, 2 argument was completely conceded, then you absolutely have to vote on. There's a reason to drop them specifically for reading it. Also, second is the universalizability of rules bad. That's it goes on. We can never have some universal aspect of what debate should be, insofar as there are always minuscule aspects of universality can never appropriate because of the differences in subjectivity and the infinite changes, which means it also defeats the point of theory in the first place. Third is that there's no stable definition of fairness in education, so theory is meaningless and completely arbitrary. That's the Murdoch evidence. Also, now let's go to the K before theory debate. They completely conceded that relationality is key to norm setting, because otherwise I'm not influenced by the shell to change my abusive ways in the future. That was the alterity argument, the first reason for my framework, which was that we can have ethical theories, or we can have theory that says something is good or bad, but the only way to change things is conceding the authority of relation. The first, which means the behavior before theory. Next is I'm going for the offensive argument. The role of constraints. What is offensive? The theory must be contextualized the framework, or else it's not offensive. You can't vote for it. They say that theory constrains what isn't offensive, but it is a question of whether the offense or defense links to the standard. Insofar as you evaluate the dissad just like you evaluate the dissad like that, then you evaluate the theory shell like that as well. Also on the voter debate. Fairness in the voter. 1 is all causes, things like family, income, and cyber program are more important determiners of fairness than abuse, because it affects the ability to argue the firstly. Second is fairness, the universal idea of a perfect debate, because the debate space which forecloses minute differences in substitution and relationality between arguments. That's the 1 evidence. Third is that relation between arguments and how they affect different debaters means there's no way for fairness to be evaluated, since arguments can be fair in some instances and unfair in others, or both at the same time. That's the Murdoch evidence. In education in the voter. 1 is what you don't text or physics hours, which prove education is not why we debate. Second is relationality between forms of education, means there's no one concept of it can hinder and help education. Let's go on 1. On the theory shall counter-interpretation converse if the 1 is not defend implementation, means that they don't get access to any of this anyway, so who cares? Let's go to the NC. They completely say multiple arguments on the TJF debate. A points that you cannot evaluate TJFs if the ethical theory is wrong, because that is incoherent. You cross by the arguments of why you should vote on being illogical is a voter. It is not incoherent to vote on a theory if it does not make sense, even if it is theoretically justified. Also, I think the theory arguments mean that you can evaluate as well. Also, multiple conceded arguments that the util collapses close. Some first, the relation is the basis for excellence. So far as aggregation relation between that, then is a relation between individuals, then it collapses to that. Second is that the only way to change motivation is through relation, which is the argument on theory cross applied to. Third is the ethical uncertainty. On the dissent, I don't defend implementation, so it doesn't matter.
The order is theory, the K or theory arguments, K or theory first arguments. Yeah, theory, then the K before theory arguments and the theory before K arguments. The AC. Alright, is anybody not ready? Overview to theory. Our interpretation is that the AF must defend the right to protect the identity of sources as a qualified right. The main problem with the 1AR is they do not understand that this shell is also implicitly saying that the 1AC must also defend implementation. If you must defend qualified right, then you must also defend implementation, which means implicitly your converse is the converse of the interp is incoherent, which means all I need to win is that either fairness or education is a voter, and I also need to extend competing interps because you have no offense on theory. The offense. I'm going for advocacy shift. Without clarifying exceptions within the 1AC, you can squeeze out of any terms I read. This is also amplified by the fact that you do not defend implementation. You can squeeze out of any disad. You literally spent 1 second on the disad saying it doesn't link, which is a massive time skew for the 1NC and the 2NR, which means you get to spend 1 second on our argument. I had to spend 3 minutes. I had to spend 3 minutes on 3 minutes on also the advent also causes it also besides the plank of the interpretation about implementation. Insofar as you do not defend a qualified right, you functionally get to shift out of what the affirmative is to delink disads. Most of the core ground on this topic and most of the literature talks about a qualified right, but insofar as you do not specify within the 1AC whether you are defending a qualified right or an absolute right, you have infinite ability to fiddle with the 1AC and delink from any disads. This was also literally amplified the fact that you don't defend implementation, which means infinite abuse for the first standard, which goes straight conceded. So there's also no weighing because he did not read any standards, which means 100% risk of link of this argument. Also 100% risk that this is true. The voters. We are going for fairness because you went for advocacy shift. You say that you say all causes to fairness. One is that just because there are all causes to fairness and fairness is hard to achieve does not mean that we should not work to maximize fairness. Second is that this assumes that fairness occurs in a vacuum. Even if there is infinite unfairness, we should still work to resolve some of that infinite unfairness. B point is that there is literally no warrant here. You just drop all causes to fairness and move on. So you say fairness isn't universalizable. Sure. The idea of what is fair isn't universalizable. We contextualize what is fair to this round. We say that the 1AC is unfair within this round, which means that this argument goes away. You say that relationality disproves, but there is no reason as to why the theory shell being tangentially related to the 1AC means that means that this takes out fairness. Also, if I win no case cross-apps the theory, then this means all of his argument that argument on fairness goes away. The line by line on theory. You say any limitation on the 1AC is reverting us back to the plantation, and one is that this argument is just affect. This argument is just affect and would justify infinite abuse. You're functionally saying that we can never have a theoretical problem with the 1AC, which justifies an infinitely abusive 1AC with infinite spikes and not defending implementation and also not defending a qualified privilege. You say universalizability, but this is answered. This is answered in the fairness. This is answered in the fairness arguments because we can recontextualize what universalization. We recontextualize what advocacy shift and what fairness is to this round. Also, there is no impact to a lack of universalizability. You say that we don't have a definition of fairness in education. A point is that there was no impact to this. B point is that we would say that fairness is equal access to the ballot. Insofar as you do not defend implementation, we lose all of our core net ground, which means we do not have equal access to the ballot, which means you functionally have no defense on the shell, and you are relying almost entirely on case cross-apps. The converse of the interp is nonsensical. You say, who cares because we don't defend implementation, but that just increases the abuse story because the interpretation implicitly says that you must defend implementation. The K before theory arguments. You extend offense, but A point is that this is just a blippy extension. You have functionally conceded the argument here. Our argument is that offense doesn't frame the K in theory debate because theory reconceptualizes what is offense. We say that offense is what occurs under a competing interps paradigm, which means that you still have ground to debate this. You say that we have to contextualize it to the role of the ballot, but no, if we recontextualize what that offense is, then we don't have to link it back to the role of the ballot. You say relationality means K before theory. Relationality means K before theory. A point is that this is very new. B point is that even if it's not new, it's one line at the bottom of the 1AC. C point is that yes, you are incentivized with a loss. This was straight conceded, which means there is no reason K comes before theory. You have also conceded reasons as to why theory comes before the case. Offensive reasons. One is that it disproves the 1AC. In order to determine whether the case is valid in the first place, we have to be able to debate them. If we cannot debate them because you are doing unfair things, we cannot debate the case in the first place. We will not learn the validity of the case, which means that theory is a prerequisite to using the affirmative's case. That is an offensive reasoning which goes straight conceded, which means that theory is the highest level. Insofar as you have literally no offense on theory, this is an easy neg ballot. The case. We are going for two arguments on the case. One is that your framework does not explain your framework does not explain action. I am not going for util, but I can still make arguments. As to why your framework is ultimately no offense, which means you would just vote on presumption. Your framework does not explain human action. The fundamental misunderstanding of the 1AR was the idea of relationality. Just because everything is related, that does not mean our ethical theories need to start from relationality. I gave you the example of util, in which things are not related. Just because we aggregate people, that does not mean the subjective identity of those people are related, which means your framework falls apart. Relationality does not justify your framework. The offense, you literally conceded the defense to your offense. You say that your offense says that they have a right to knowability, but there is no reason as to why that right exists in the first place. Your only argument here is that it's key to opacity, but you are not justifying why a right to knowability and opacity exists in the first place, which means theory comes first. He's conceded all the offense.
What's the advocacy shift as relating to fairness?
You skew like literally all of the 2NR's ability to contest the 1AC. Like, do you want me to explain that? If you shift out of the advocacy, you can just delink disads, i.e. what you just did, by not defending implementation.
The order's AC overview and then theory. The first thing on theory is going to be like weighing case.
Sorry. Is that like underview stuff, or is that like arguments made on the shell?
The like case or theory.
Okay.
Anybody not ready?
Sorry.
That's fair.
The app? Okay.
Everything functional relations is interaction with people, culture, locations that are always change subjectivity. This framework was completely conceded. The only argument made was that ethics should not start from relationality, but this argument does not make sense. Insofar as util is the only example, when I say util is a question of relationality between individuals, i.e. aggregation of that. It's not a question of a relation between the subjectivities of the individuals, but rather just relationality in general. Any interaction is relational. They concede the descriptive claim, which means the argument doesn't make sense. And offense. Opacity is multiplied with the relational experiences in your life that have constructed your individuality. Embracing realization testing and abrasive opacity is a literally relationship to subjectivity. The right to confidentiality is absolutely necessary to respect the opacity. Subject and the rights for others to understand the right or their relationality. Breaking confidentiality agreement forces the subject into revealing aspects of their opacity, which restricts realizations and attempt to comprehend the incomprehensibleness of opacity, denies inappropriate subjectivity. The only offensive argument against is that the only offensive argument against is that there's no reason the right exists. The right exists because of framework. That's what I just justified in the 1AR overview and the 2AR overview. That because we value a relation and embracing realization, then we have to embrace opacity. Let's go to the Wayne case debate. The only argument they extend why I cannot weigh cases is because it's a prerequisite to evaluating from the case in the first place. But first of all, it's only about what is abusive, which is the advocacy, not the framework. I'm extending framework warrants as to why they are not able to evaluate. That was the 1AR. Also, all of the arguments why fairness is not a voter in context of the 1AC is not a question of whether weighing case, but for theory. But my descriptive claims about the world, I don't have to win the 1AC, rather my just conception of how the world works, which operates on the pre-fiat level as well. So any arguments about universalizability or relationality still apply. So now let's go to the theory debate. Overview. This shell does not matter. All the arguments of contextual effect that I can shift out of a qualified right. His arguments are completely moot, but he doesn't get them anyways. Not about implementation, but rather ground about privilege. That was the advocacy argument. Not whether he gets this as if I defend implementation, but rather if I defend an absolute right, then I can expect out of things in the next speech, which means you cannot grant him the new 2NR extension of this. Also, let's go to the fairness debate. he says often, or I never defended the affirmative only when he never says it, which means that they do not actually have such arguments. I'm on the fairness arguments. He conceded multiple reasons why fairness is not a voter. The one I'm going for that was completely mishandled was the fairness of the universal idea of perfect debate, which forecloses my new difference subject in relationality between arguments. That's the equal. So on one evidence, it was straight conceded, which means you're going to evaluate it first. If you do not know what the purpose of the theory shell is, then you cannot vote for it. The purpose of the theory shell is trying to create a more fair space. If you know what fairness is, then you cannot vote for it, especially to the point where you conceded that there is no one universal definition of fairness. You say it's contextual to the 1AC, but that is not true. You're saying the 1AC is unfair and then have some ideal concept of fairness. Insofar as that concept of fairness is not stable, then there is absolutely no reason to vote for the shell. Also, they can see that relationality is key to norm setting. Insofar as the point of theory is to evaluate norm setting and to change my ways in the fact that we have to rely on relation to this. I have to take the theory shell, have relation to that, and then motivate my actions based on that. But that proves relation between this, which proves that case comes before theory. So there's not a voter. Norm setting, which is the point of theory, needs relation first, and I can wait this against theory.
You want to do it or you want me to do it?
You can do it. You.
Okay. Congrats to both debaters for making it to, what is this, quarterfinals? The 2018 Grapevine Classic. The decision is a 3-0 decision for the negative from South Lake Carroll. I guess I can start. So you might expect my decision to go something along the lines of like a hack against K's, but it actually doesn't. And the thing that interests me here is I actually thought there was a good chance I was going to vote AF by the end of this debate. Like I thought the 2NR was like made a clever spin on the like, oh, my term also said implementation, but like the offense wasn't super strong, and so I thought 2AR had a relatively easy out in this debate. But I just don't think the 2AR is going for the right stuff as an answer to theory. So sure, you win the framework stuff, whatever. You got your advocacy, got your contention, and your offense and stuff like that. So we'll start on the arguments to the theory shell. So your first argument is just like the argument about like don't let them weigh case against the K. So you seem to think that this is a reason for like why you get to leverage some of your framework arguments as DAs to theory, and I think that's probably fine. The extrapolation that I don't think is fine is the last sentence of the 2AR where you're like, this means you evaluate case before theory. And there's certainly, I don't think, anything that warrants why that statement is true. There's certainly no extension of roll the ballot first. There's just arguments for why you get to leverage the framework arguments as DAs to theory. So I think you get that. That much I am willing to give you. But I think the only argument you extend as an offensive argument against theory is this universality DA. This just argument that they're attempt to make debate into a sort of perfect, ideal version. And maybe they attempt to do that, but the 2NR is pretty explicit here. They're just like, nope, we're not universalized. We've contextualized fairness as a sort of contingent construct that's about what happens in this round. I'm contextualizing all of my offense to the advocacy shift that has occurred. And I'm not sure if this is a great defensive argument, but certainly it's conceded, and there's no pushback on this. The only thing the 2AR says is it was conceded, but really the 2NR spent a decent amount of time answering this. Everything else, I don't think is offense for you. So arguments about how you get to weigh the framework arguments, like it operates on a pre-fiat level, that's totally fine. Arguments for, why relationality is key to norm setting, totally fine. But what is that? How's that offense against the theory shell? What is that reason for theory to go away? It doesn't seem like either of those rise up to that threshold. And so what I really think the only offensive argument you have is universalizability bad, and the 2NR has put defense here that is just conceded. I'm willing to think that the advocacy shift stuff is sufficient to say like there's a violation of fairness, vote next sort of thing. I thought a 2AR that just put like a few more DAs on theory and just weighed them, easy out. I don't think most of the 2NR defense to it is great because a lot of it is kind of just like haphazard and pulled together given the shift that occurs. The last thought I'll introduce is I have no idea what it means for you to not defend implementation. I can't conceptualize a world in which you read a card about a federal shield law, and then the neg says and you're functionally saying we should have reporters privilege, and the neg says we shouldn't because the base hates it, and your answer is we don't defend implementation. And I have no idea, logically speaking, how those worlds make any sense whatsoever. And so for judges like me in the future, like if you're defending implementation, fine, and if you're not, be much more clear about it, because I have no idea what the world of advocacy, federal shield law good, 1AR, no implementation. I have no idea what that means.
Okay. I just have one question.
Mm-hmm.
My answer to the contextualized fairness thing was that even though you contextualize like the offense to fairness, in terms of the shell, that like the end goal of fairness isn't that bad. So like, how did you?
Yeah. So what line of the 2NR or the 1 and C are you going to draw to support that thesis claim? It's, to me, an assertion that has been pushed back on. The idea that the neg necessarily relies on a universal concept of fairness is unclear to me as to why that is necessarily the case. Like, if that is the case, you have to A, explicitly talk about it in the context of the 2NR arguments, and B, like, draw some lines out that are like, this is their attempt to be universal. Like, one line from the 1 and C voter would have been probably sufficient for it to establish this link argument here.
Okay.
But I don't really think it's the case based on the 2AR rhetoric.
Don't disagree with anything that Lawrence said. I think that the best place, in addition to what he said, though, the best place for you to have pushback would be on the question of what is fairness, which I think is not clear into the 2NR. And even in the 2NR, it's only extrapolating from like the internal link of one of the standards arguments that he makes in the 1NC, not actually a clear, explicit explanation of what fairness is coming from that speech. Like I could not, if I had to draw a line from the 1NC to the 2NR with an explanation of fairness. I think it's in part of the internal link for the standards debate, but not definitely clearly written. And I thought that was a good terminal defense argument for you. Is like, if we don't know what theory is or we don't know what fairness is, then you can't vote for it. Mm-hmm. And I think that would may have been like a better use of time on that part of the fairness debate as opposed to like the other stuff that Lawrence is talking about. That'd be the only thing I would add.
Sorry.
No way.
Do you think when debating AFs like this, and like when you know the debate's kind of gonna end up like this, do you think it's like worth it to have like a, I don't want to say like a definition, or rather some sort of articulation of what fairness is in the 1NC?
So, yes, I think what would be better to fit that contextualization would be like have an author who writes about debate and what fairness is. That would both contextualize it to what it means in debate as well as this round. And I think that'd be much easier to draw a line from. And I think you can just read it as a part of either, you can read it in the voter section or you can read it somewhere else, depending on how you want to do that.
Yeah. So I also don't disagree with things that have been said. A couple things. I'm more inclined to air neg on theory, especially when there's a very clear, like, demonstrated abuse in round in terms of kicking out of the DA. I think you should have pointed that out because I think in my paradigm, I'm more likely to vote on T and look at T to come first when you lose access to something you've already run in the round. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Especially when that's not clear. I think it's articulated very well. That said, Grayson, I don't really even if I don't understand why you keep on like re-articulating what this relationship stuff is. The only thing I would suggest on theory for you to make things a little bit more clear is instead of maybe going just for fairness and the advocacy standard, I think you should go for the internal link to clash is probably important, and then go for more about like in our efforts to make debate better, even if we're not universalizing it. Going for having fair amounts of clash and equal access to clash is better in terms of understanding. That means the theory debate is better, and it also probably means that we're more likely to understand things and like have portable skills from debate. I'm probably more amenable to that argument than just like straight fairness. I think that's probably a little bit easier, especially contextualize it in terms of like what is relational, and so fairness is a necessary side constraint on our relations. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think a better 2AR would have been?
So I think if you had gone, I think the better 2AR would have been just like a really clear explanation about what Glissant talks about. Because in the 2AR, I don't think I have a specific wording that explains what the case says. Right, like you're like everything is relational, therefore we have to like there's a good thing part of like in terms of the top of the overview, but I don't necessarily understand what the AF does per the 2AR.
The extension of like opacity in the offense, like was that just unclear? Or?
It was a little unclear, and also I just like I think it was a little jargony. I think it could be a little bit more well explained, and it also makes me more inclined to understand like what it means, like what Lauren said, what it means in context of not being implemented. Because that's another thing that just like doesn't make intuitive sense to me.
Right.
Because I think that it should be implemented. It's a good idea. So that kind of makes it difficult. But
what
I think
about more in terms of the theory debate?
yeah,
Maybe
so,
which I should have gone for from the 1AR.